The ashes of Earth. I watched my city burn from a hospital rooftop. The sky above had split open less than an hour earlier. Massive alien vessels descending like vengeful gods, their hulls black against the morning light. No warning, no demand for surrender. Just fire. The first beam struck downtown, a pillar of plasma carving through skyscrapers like paper. People didn't scream. They didn't have time. I should have died with them. My wife was at work. My son at school. I was patching a broken generator on the hospital roof when the power went out and the ground shook beneath me. By the time I looked up, everything was ash. The Empire called it a strategic enforcement. They broadcast their message through hijacked satellites hours later, translated into every major human language. Earth is now under imperial governance. Resistance will be extinguished. Compliance ensures survival. But there was no compliance left in us. Not after what they did. The hospital was gone by nightfall. I pulled 6 survivors from the rubble before the second wave hit. Aerial drones sweeping through the ruins, hunting anything that moved. We fled into the metro tunnels, deeper than the scanners could reach. For days, we lived like rats. The smell of smoke clung to our clothes, our skin. Some wanted to believe help would come. That the UN, the US military, China, someone, anyone, was fighting back. But there was no war. There was only a slaughter. The Empire didn't come to conquer. They came to silence us. In those first weeks, we scavenged what we could. Batteries, canned food, shortwave radios. We weren't soldiers. I was an electrical engineer. Mala, a retired nurse. Big Sam used to fix elevators. But underground, in that choking darkness, something began to change. We didn't cry anymore. We didn't wait for orders. We made plans. We listened to static on the radio every night until one day, just a blip, we caught a human voice from Chicago. Confirm resistance, cell alive. Repeat, cell alive. Hope is dangerous. It's also contagious. More signals followed. Scraps of messages, coordinates, names. A movement was forming in the ashes, fragmented at first, but stubborn. The Empire had underestimated one thing. Humanity doesn't kneel easily. Not after you murder our families. I still remember the first alien patrol we took down. A skirmish, really. 4 of us with pipe bombs and homemade camouflage ambushed a drone and 2 soldiers. We barely survived, but we salvaged pieces of their gear. That was the beginning. They thought they'd broken us. But in those ruins, they lit something older than any empire. They lit a fire. The fire spreads. The first time I heard someone call it a war, I laughed. Not because it was funny, nothing was funny anymore, but because it sounded absurd. A war implies 2 sides with a chance. We didn't have armies. We didn't have space fleets. We had rusted tools, civilian grit, and rage hotter than their orbital strikes. And yet, across every continent, people like us were still breathing, still fighting. It started small. We rebuilt old ham radios, tapping into abandoned telecom towers the Empire overlooked. Most were fried by EMPs, but a few, those hidden deep or shielded in mountains, survived. One night, we heard voices from across the Atlantic. Glasgow cell reporting active, confirming Empire troop drop in Manchester. Engage with improvised IEDs. Request relay to Dublin and Oslo. That was the moment it became real. We weren't alone. Soon after, we found a crashed Empire Scout drone in the outskirts of what used to be St. Louis. Damaged but not destroyed. Took us 2 weeks to gut it, study the tech, and rig a working uplink jammer. Our gear was crude, car batteries, scrap metal, duct tape, but it worked. The next time they sent a drone, it fell out of the sky like a rock. Other cells started copying our designs. Within a month, downed alien drones littered the ruins of cities they thought they owned. The Empire called them primitive raids. We called them training exercises. They still didn't understand what they'd done. They saw us as a feral species, a pest infestation to be managed. Their mistake wasn't underestimating our weapons. It was underestimating our memory. We remembered every crater where a child used to play, every toppled building that held the beating heart of a neighborhood. We carried those ghosts with us into battle, and they made us sharper. Then came the break. a resistance group in Antarctica of all places, research scientists turned saboteurs, discovered a vulnerability in the Empire's orbital supply network. One of the relay stations hovered too close to the pole during its low-orbit window. For 5 minutes a day, it was exposed and vulnerable. We built a launcher from mining equipment and scrap steel. Called it the Skyhammer. It fired only once, but that was enough. The supply station exploded mid-transit, raining burning wreckage over the Southern Ocean. For the first time, humanity scored a kill in space. The Empire's response was furious. Ships redeployed, patrols doubled. But it didn't stop us. It inspired us. From Tokyo to Toronto, Cairo to Cape Town, fires flared in the dark. Not the fires they made, but ours. Signal fires. Acts of rebellion. The resistance was no longer scattered whispers. It was a storm-gathering force. We didn't have a flag. We didn't need one. All we had were call signs, radio frequencies, and the unshakable conviction that we would never kneel again. The fire was spreading, and the galaxy hadn't seen anything yet. Forged in ruin. By the 3rd month, the ruins felt like home. Not because we wanted them to, but because we had no other choice. The cities the Empire destroyed became our crucibles. Every collapsed building was a shield. Every scorched alleyway, a hunting ground. And every survivor still breathing was forged into something harder than steel. We stopped scavenging and started building. Our engineers, ex-mechanics, students, even hobbyists, worked around the clock, reverse engineering whatever alien tech we could get our hands on. They couldn't recreate it perfectly, but that didn't matter. We weren't trying to match the Empire's machines. We were trying to outthink them. Marla, our medic, figured out how to repurpose alien power cores to run hospital equipment again. Juno, a robotics grad student from Brazil, rewired a drone's targeting optics to spot cloak scouts before they could ambush us. I focused on propulsion, built our first human-powered railgun using a decommissioned train engine and superconductors from a ruined university lab. It was crude. It was ugly. But it punched a hole clean through an Empire dropship. We called it Frankensteel. She became the prototype. Word spread fast. Resistance cells began to coordinate more than attacks. We were sharing designs. Schematics were passed on paper, through hard drives, or scratched into walls for the next group to find. Across continents, the same weapons appeared. Rifles cobbled from alien barrels and human grips, grenades mixing starship fuel and old pipe bombs. We weren't just surviving anymore. We were evolving. The Empire finally noticed. Their patrols grew more cautious, more frequent. They stopped marching openly and started sweeping with dreadnoughts. But every time they adapted, so did we. Then came the turning point. A troop carrier went down outside Johannesburg. Sabotage? We never found out. But we got to it first, before the Empire could destroy the wreck. What we found inside changed everything. A functioning command core, fully intact, loaded with navigation data, weapons specs, language archives. And inside the logs were internal reports, Empire officers expressing shock that we hadn't collapsed. That our primitive species was manufacturing resistance-grade weapons in less than 90 Earth days. They thought we were irrational, animalistic. What they didn't understand was that humans weren't irrational. We were furious. From the ashes of our dead, we built a purpose. From broken stone and broken lives, we forged something new, a unified Earth. The politics were gone. The nations, too. All that remained was one voice, one vengeance, one mission. Strike back. A month later, we brought down a capital-class warship. It landed in ruins outside what used to be Berlin. We lured it in with false signals, jammed its comms, and hit it with railfire and hacked drones until it cracked open like a rotting egg. We took prisoners. We took weapons. But most importantly, we took the ship. That was the day we stopped being hunted. That was the day the galaxy learned what Deathwalders really looked like. Firestorm in the stars. We named the ship Ashes of Earth. It wasn't our first capture, but it was the first we made ours. Human tech wired into alien guts. A Frankenstein's monster of war, scarred and patched, humming with power we barely understood, but controlled. When we lifted off from the surface for the first time, silence fell across the underground hangar. Not awe, not fear, resolve. We weren't just going to survive anymore. We were going to take the fight to the stars. The Ashes was one of 6 retrofitted ships. Others followed: Kilimanjaro, Hudson, Ghost of Mumbai, crewed by engineers, mechanics, hackers, and survivors. No formal military ranks, just operators. Veterans of a war we didn't start but were now determined to finish. The Empire's fleets still circled Earth, but now they were stretched thin, spread across 1,000 systems, busy crushing other insurrections. They didn't believe we could reach them, so we made sure our first strike was loud. An orbital refinery in the Beta Draconis sector, feeding fuel to 6 Empire colonies, went dark overnight. One moment it was relaying coordinates to patrol ships. The next, a storm of improvised missiles and rail fire shredded it from the inside. No survivors, just a scorched message carved into its side with plasma torches. You burned our cities. We are burning your empire. The psychological damage was worse than the material. Empire communications became erratic. Ships were recalled. Panic set in. We didn't slow down. Over the next 3 weeks, we hit supply chains, ambushed patrol vessels, and ignited riots on 3 subjugated worlds. Local species, once cowed into obedience, began fighting back after seeing what we'd done. The Empire's greatest mistake hadn't been burning Earth. It was broadcasting our defiance across the stars. But no strike mattered more than the final one. We targeted the orbital citadel above Omex-9, an Empire core world. The citadel housed fleet command for the entire quadrant. Taking it down wasn't just symbolic, it would blind their operations across hundreds of systems. They saw us coming. This time, they were ready. The battle was brutal. The Ashes took 4 direct hits. We lost 2 other ships in the approach. But we made it to the hull, breached the interior, fought room to room in zero gravity, side by side with alien prisoners who joined our cause. I carried the charge myself, straight to the main reactor. A prototype, human-triggered, alien-powered device. I still remember the look on that Imperial Admiral's face as I stood there, burned and blooded, detonator in hand. "This is for Earth," I said. And then the fire came. The citadel fell. The fleet retreated. The quadrant broke. And across the galaxy, for the first time, the word human was spoken with fear. We never asked for this war. But when they burned our cities, they lit something deeper than hatred. They lit unity, resolve, fury. We were forged in fire. Now we were the fire.